There is a quiet truth that many people begin to sense only as the years pass and the seasons of life grow softer, more fragile. It's not the fear of death that unsettles most hearts. It's the quiet ache of looking back and realizing that so much time was spent being busy, yet so little of it was ever truly lived. We chase years with urgency, only to discover that what we were really yearning for was something much smaller. A moment, a breath, a peaceful presence in our own lives. A few winters ago in the mountains outside Chiang Mai, I spent several weeks at a temple tucked among pine trees and morning mists. The abbot there, a retired monk in his 82nd, had a routine as simple as it was profound. Every morning, just after dawn, he would sit by a small wooden window that overlooked a quiet garden of moss, stone, and plum trees. He never rushed. He never spoke much. But one morning, as we sat together in silence, he smiled faintly and said, "When I was young, I chased after time. Now in my old age, I realized time was always still. It was I who was running." There was something in his voice, not regret, but reverence, a kind of gentle wisdom that doesn't come from books or teachings, but from living fully through the quiet hours most people overlook. What he discovered, and what so many of us miss, is that the richness of life is never found in the length of our days, but in the depth of our presence within them. Many of us, especially as we grow older, begin to feel the days slipping faster. The months blur into seasons. A year ends before we even learn to write its name. And we tell ourselves, "Someday I'll rest. Someday I'll slow down. Someday I'll start truly living." But someday is a dangerous word. It whispers comfort while stealing our most precious resource. This moment, the Buddha once said, "The trouble is, you think you have time." And in that single line, he wasn't trying to scare us, but to wake us up, to remind us that time is not something we own. It is something we are entrusted with, and it passes through us like a river, not to be captured, only to be felt. In this video, we'll take a quiet journey through 13 reflections rooted in Buddhist teachings, life experience, and heartfelt stories on how to spend our time wisely, especially in the later seasons of life. Each part touches a different area of our human experience: time, priorities, relationships, creativity, inner peace, and more. And because this video is longer than most, you'll find the full list of chapters with their timestamps in the description below. Whether you wish to experience the entire journey or return later to explore a particular topic that speaks to your heart, you'll always know where to begin again. So, if you're watching this now, perhaps with a warm cup of tea beside you, I invite you to slow down with me. Let go of urgency. Breathe deeply. You are not behind. You are not late. You are right on time to begin again. Let us begin. Part 1. The illusion of time. There's something strange that happens to us as we age. When we were children, a single summer felt like a lifetime. The days seemed endless, stretching wide and slow like golden sunlight across the floor. Even the smallest events, a family picnic, a bike ride, the sound of cicadas on a warm evening, seemed to linger, imprinting themselves deep into our memory. But now it feels like the months vanish in a blink. Years pass as if they were mere chapters in a book we barely had time to read. Why is that? What changed? The Buddha taught us that everything is impermanent, but he also taught us that our perception of reality is often an illusion shaped by the restless mind. Time as we experience it is not a fixed river, but a feeling, a sensation deeply tied to our awareness. The more awake we are in a moment, the longer and fuller it feels. And yet, the more distracted, routine, or mindless our lives become, the faster time slips away unnoticed, like water through cupped hands. I once met an elderly woman named Clara during a weekend retreat in Oregon. She was 78, had raised 4 children, outlived her husband, and volunteered twice a week at a local library. Her life was full, but something she said struck me to the core as we sat under a maple tree sipping tea. She looked out over the quiet lake and whispered, "I don't remember most of my life, not because I didn't live it, but because I wasn't really there." That moment stayed with me. Clara's experience is more common than we think. As adults, our days become predictable. We wake up, make coffee, read the news, go about our tasks, errands, chores, conversations that skim the surface. The brain, ever efficient, stops recording these repeated patterns. Neurologically, when the mind encounters something new, it pays attention. But when it recognizes a familiar loop, it tunes out. This is why time feels slower when we're traveling, falling in love, or learning something new. Our awareness is heightened, but routine, especially in old age, makes time collapse. From a Buddhist perspective, this is what we call time blindness, a kind of spiritual drowsiness. We may be moving through life, but we're not truly present. The Buddha encouraged his disciples to cultivate sati, or mindfulness, not just in meditation but in everyday living. He once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." It sounds simple, but living in the present requires effort. Gentle, compassionate effort. It's not about grand changes. It's about waking up to what's already here. One gentle way to reclaim our sense of time is to invite novelty into our lives, not in the sense of chasing excitement, but in breaking the routine patterns that lull us to sleep. Take a different route on your morning walk. Try preparing a meal you've never cooked before. Talk to someone new at the market. Even sitting in a different chair during breakfast can subtly awaken your mind. These are not trivial acts. They are small rebellions against spiritual numbness. Another practice is to intentionally pause throughout the day. Take a moment, just 10 seconds, to breathe, to feel your feet on the floor, to notice the sound of the wind or the texture of your hands. These micro moments, when repeated, become anchors that slow time, that bring you back to yourself. And perhaps most importantly, reflect daily. Even if it's just a few lines in a journal, writing down what you felt, saw, or learned helps your mind store the day as meaningful. As one Zen master said, "A day without reflection is like a meal without salt." In the end, the illusion is not that time is moving fast. It's that we believe we are powerless to slow it. But through mindfulness, through awareness, we touch eternity in a single breath. Because time is not something we chase, it is something we awaken to. Part 2. What truly matters. There's a curious moment that tends to arrive quietly somewhere in the second half of life. It doesn't come with fanfare, nor does it demand immediate action, but it lingers like a shadow on a long afternoon. It's the realization that so much of what once felt important may not have mattered all that much at all. Years ago, during a hospice volunteer training, I met a retired nurse named Helen. She had spent decades working in hospitals, delivering babies, comforting the dying, holding space for every kind of human joy and sorrow. At 72, she had chosen to spend her free time with those nearing the end of their lives, not out of obligation, but from a quiet knowing that there are lessons at the edge of life that the busy world doesn't teach. She told me something that has stayed with me ever since. No one in all my years of sitting beside the dying ever asked for more meetings, more paychecks, or more emails. They asked for people, for peace, for time they never made. The Buddha spoke often of right view, a clarity of perception that allows us to see through the fog of delusion and grasp the truths that truly liberate. One such truth is this: not all tasks are equal, and not everything that demands your attention deserves it. Yet so many of us, especially in the prime of our working years, confuse being busy with being purposeful. We fill our days not with meaning, but with motion, and we convince ourselves that urgency equals importance. But here's the catch. Time has its own quiet way of revealing truth. It's not until we look back, sometimes decades later, that we realize the cost of those choices, the missed birthdays, the quiet moments skipped, the small chances to be kind that we were too hurried to take. In Buddhist teaching, there is a practice known as the 5 recollections, or Panca Anusati. Among them is this profound reminder: I am subject to aging. There is no way to escape it. I am subject to death. There is no way to avoid it. All that is dear to me will become separated from me. These are not meant to depress us. They are meant to awaken us to what truly matters now, before it slips away. One helpful practice we can borrow here is something I call the deathbed perspective. Imagine yourself 30 years from now, lying in bed, reflecting on the life you've lived. What will matter to you in those final hours? Will it be the spotless kitchen, the perfectly balanced checkbook, or will it be the time you spent listening to your grandchild talk about their dreams, the walks you took with an old friend, the courage it took to forgive someone after years of silence? The truth is, clarity often comes in stillness. But in our modern world, we rarely slow down long enough to feel what truly matters. That's why we must learn to choose with intention, especially as we grow older. We must become guardians of our own attention. Here's a small practice you can try. Every morning before the noise of the day begins, sit with a pen and paper and ask, what would truly matter today if this were my last? Don't overthink it. Write what comes to your heart. Then let those answers, not your calendar or your to-do list, guide your next steps. The Buddha once said, your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart to give yourself to it. He wasn't speaking only of employment. He was speaking of Dharma, your soul's true calling. That may be raising a garden or helping someone heal, or simply sitting quietly watching the sunrise, knowing that you are still here, still breathing, still able to love. Because in the end, what truly matters is not how much we did, but how deeply we lived. Not how full our schedule was, but how full our hearts became. And the beautiful truth is, it's never too late to begin living that way. Part 3. Relationships as sacred grounds. There's a certain quiet that fills the room when someone over 70 speaks of old friends, not in the noisy way that youth speaks of crowds and parties, but in the kind of hush that comes when memories feel too tender to hold out loud. You'll often hear something like, "We lost touch," or "I wonder how they're doing these days." And sometimes, "I wish I'd said more before it was too late." In a small Buddhist community near San Jose, I once met a man named Roy. He was in his mid-80s, tall and soft-spoken, with a gentle shake in his hands that time had gifted him. During a group reflection on forgiveness, he opened up, haltingly at first, about a brother he hadn't spoken to in over 30 years, a fight over something trivial, long since forgotten in detail but not in feeling, had severed the tie. And yet not a single week passed without Roy thinking of him. "I've written him letters," he said, eyes wet but unwavering, "but I never had the courage to send them." There is a profound teaching in Buddhism. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law. And in that moment, You could see Roy wrestling not just with regret, but with something more subtle, grief for a relationship still alive but long abandoned. So many of us carry invisible cords tied to others, some warm, some tangled, some frayed beyond recognition. And as we grow older, the weight of those relationships, the spoken and the unspoken, the presence and the absence, begins to shape us in ways that are hard to name. For some, it's the sweetness of a decades-long marriage, tender even in silence. For others, it's the ache of a friendship lost not to death, but to distance. And for many, it's the soft sorrow of realizing we were present in body but absent in heart. In Buddhist understanding, relationships are seen not just as social ties, but as sacred fields where our karma unfolds. Every interaction, whether brief or deep, is a kind of planting. A word spoken in kindness becomes a seed of peace, a moment of neglect. A missed apology becomes a karmic ripple we carry until it's resolved. This is why the Buddha placed so much emphasis on right speech and right intention. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. A simple smile, a question asked with genuine care. The small things are not small. They are, in truth, the fabric of connection. One story from the suttas tells of the Buddha's cousin Devadatta, who became his adversary. Despite betrayal and harm, the Buddha never returned anger with anger. He taught his disciples that the heart must remain spacious enough to hold even those who have wronged us, not to justify harm, but to dissolve the bitterness that harms us when we carry it. If you're watching this now, perhaps someone has come to mind, a sibling, an old friend, a spouse long past, or maybe even a neighbor you once shared coffee with but haven't spoken to in years. Ask yourself gently, is there something left unsaid, something worth reopening? Not to fix the past, but to free the present. And if that feels too far, then start small. A short message, a letter, a prayer, even holding someone in your heart with kindness. Through the practice of metta-bhana, loving kindness meditation can begin to mend the unseen threads. Relationships are not built only on the big things, the anniversaries, the reunions, the heartfelt apologies. They are built more often on the daily gestures, the call to check in, the remembering of a favorite story, the quiet listening without needing to reply. And yes, sometimes the bond remains broken. Not every door reopens, but even then peace is possible, not because the other person changes, but because you choose to release the suffering. As the Dhammapada reminds us, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Let us speak fewer words, but make them count. Let us love not in grand declarations, but in quiet daily deposits of care. Let us make peace not only with others, but within ourselves, for the ones we love too little, too late. Because in the end, it is not the number of people we've known that matters. It is the depth of presence we offered to those who crossed our path. And it is never too late to plant one more seed of kindness in the sacred ground between hearts. Part 4. Purpose and Inner Work. After retirement, there is a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes deafening, that arrives after the structure of work begins to dissolve. No more morning rush, no more meetings, no deadlines, no office politics. At first, there is a sense of relief, even celebration. You sleep in, you travel, you enjoy the leisure that once seemed so far away. But then after a while, something begins to shift. A quiet question, barely a whisper, rises from the stillness. Now what? It's a question not of survival, but of meaning. And for many people over 60, it is the most important question of all. I once spoke with a man named Richard, a retired architect from Colorado. For over 40 years, He designed buildings that would outlive him: hospitals, schools, civic centers. He was meticulous, driven, widely respected. But after retiring at 67, he told me something that caught me off guard. "I don't know who I am when I'm not building something." He said it without sadness, but also without clarity. He wasn't lost, exactly, just untethered. Like a ship that had left the harbor but hadn't yet set its course. He didn't miss the work. Not really. He missed the purpose. In Buddhism, there is a concept called sankhara, formations of the mind, patterns of doing, becoming, achieving. These formations, if left unchecked, can run our lives without ever asking us if they still serve us. Retirement, in this light, isn't the end of purpose. It's the beginning of conscious purpose, a new chance to turn inward, to meet ourselves not as workers, parents, providers, or achievers, but as human beings with something still beautiful to offer. The Buddha taught that right livelihood is not just about earning income, but about living in harmony with our values. And after retirement, that harmony may look very different. It may mean mentoring a young neighbor, writing down stories for your grandchildren, tending a garden with reverence, volunteering not to stay busy, but to stay connected to the web of life. I met a retired school teacher once who began reading aloud to children at the public library every Thursday. She called it her Dharma in disguise. To her, it wasn't just a hobby. It was a continuation of her inner work, showing up with patience, presence, and warmth for others. She said, "When I stop giving, I stop growing." But here's the beautiful paradox. Purpose at this stage of life isn't necessarily about doing more. It's about being more present, being more generous, being more in touch with what moves your heart, even if no one else sees it. And yes, there are those days when the body feels heavier, when the world moves too fast, when you wonder if you've become invisible. But please know this: your worth is not tied to what you produce. Your presence, your listening, your stories, your silent wisdom is a gift this world desperately needs. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha shared, "Just as the great ocean has only one taste, the taste of salt, so too does the Dharma have only one taste, the taste of liberation." Liberation at this stage in life often means freeing yourself from the belief that you must still prove something. It means embracing your experience not as something behind you, but something you now embody. You are a walking testament to survival, to love, to endurance. So, if you find yourself asking, "What's my purpose now?" try asking instead, "What brings my heart alive? Where can I offer my stillness, my compassion, my presence?" And know this: even the quietest acts, making soup for a neighbor, lighting incense each morning, sitting with someone who is grieving, can be offerings of the highest kind, not because they are loud or visible, but because they are rooted in awareness. Purpose after retirement doesn't have to be grand, it just has to be real. And in truth, your most meaningful work may not be what you build with your hands, but what you awaken in others simply by being deeply, unmistakably yourself. Part 5. Health, Energy, and Compassion for the Body. There comes a time in life when the body no longer obeys with the ease it once did. The knees creak a little louder in the morning. The back hums with quiet reminders when we rise from a chair. Even a gentle walk can feel like a meditation in patience. But rather than seeing these changes as betrayals, what if we learn to see them as invitations, gentle nudges from the body, asking us to slow down, to listen, to care? In Buddhist thought, the body is not an obstacle on the path. It is the first foundation of mindfulness. Kauyampasana, as it is called in the Satipatthana Sutta, is the practice of watching the body not with judgment but with a loving awareness that says, "I see you, old friend. I thank you for carrying me." I once met a woman named Grace at a mindfulness retreat in Northern California. She was 74 and recovering from hip surgery. For most of her life, she had been fiercely independent, hiking, dancing, even teaching yoga. But after her surgery, she told me she began to feel like a stranger in her own body. "I felt betrayed," she said softly, "like my body had decided to move on without telling me." And yet, as the retreat went on, I watched Grace do something extraordinary. She began to befriend her body again. Every step with her cane became a lesson in presence. Every breath a prayer. One morning during walking meditation, she turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "I thought I needed to get strong again, but maybe what I really needed was to get kind." That shift from performance to compassion is at the heart of Buddhist practice. The Buddha taught us to treat our bodies not as machines to be pushed, but as temples, temporary, fragile, yet profoundly sacred, the vessel through which we experience this life. And when we stop resisting its aging, something beautiful happens. We start to listen. When was the last time you asked your body what it needed, rather than told it what to do? So often we treat fatigue like a weakness. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. We ignore pain, silence our hunger, override our natural rhythms in the name of productivity or obligation. But after 60, the body begins to whisper more clearly. It asks not for control but for care, not for punishment but for presence. A Buddhist elder once said, "The body is our first teacher. It teaches us impermanence every day." And indeed, the wrinkles, the slower movements, the forgotten names, they are not signs of failure. They are signs that the world is asking us to live more slowly, more gently, more deeply. One of the most powerful practices you can begin today is the body scan meditation, lying down or sitting comfortably, bringing awareness slowly to each part of the body, not to fix or change anything, but simply to notice, to offer attention like you would to a beloved child or an old friend. You may be surprised at what surfaces. Not just tension, but gratitude. Not just discomfort, but forgiveness. Movement, too, can be sacred. You don't need to run marathons or lift weights. A 10-minute walk in the morning sun, a few gentle stretches before bed, even standing outside barefoot to feel the earth. These are not small things. They are rituals of return. They remind your body that it still matters, that you are still here, that life is still flowing through you. The Buddha said, "To keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our minds strong and clear." This is not about clinging to youth. It is about cultivating vitality, the kind that allows us to be present for the joys and sorrows of this human life. So, if your body is slower now, gentler, more tender, let it be. Treat it not as a broken tool, but as a wise teacher, one that has carried you across decades through heartbreak and healing, through love and loss. One that still wakes up each day and says, "Let's keep going." And maybe, just maybe, the greatest act of spiritual courage at this stage of life is learning to love the body exactly as it is. Part 6. Learning and sharing wisdom. There's a quiet misconception in our culture that learning is something reserved for the young, that it's a process with an end point, a finish line, perhaps marked by graduation caps or career milestones. But the truth is, the deepest learning begins only when the pressure to achieve fades, and what remains is pure heartfelt curiosity. And more often than not, it happens later in life. I remember once attending a Dharma talk at a small sa in New Mexico. The teacher, a 92-year-old lay practitioner named Samuel, opened the session not with a sermon but with a question. "What are you learning these days?" he asked, scanning the room slowly. Some people chuckled politely, thinking it rhetorical, but he repeated it, this time softer. "I'm serious. What are you still learning?" When no one responded right away, he smiled and said, "I'm learning how to be gentle with my fear of forgetting names." The room fell silent, not out of pity, but out of recognition. That quiet vulnerability, it was a teaching all on its own. In Buddhism, there is a concept called prajna, or wisdom. Not just intellectual knowing, but the kind of deep understanding that arises from life itself. Wisdom doesn't come only from books or scriptures. It is carved into the heart by decades of experience, by heartbreak and healing, by showing up again and again for the messy miracle that is this human life. And here's the beautiful truth. You don't need to be a scholar or a monk to be a teacher. In fact, some of the best teachers are those who are still learning themselves. The Buddha often emphasized that one of the most powerful ways to integrate what we learn is to share it with others, not as experts, but as fellow travelers on the path. A dear friend of mine, Linda, began teaching meditation classes at her senior center at the age of 76. She wasn't certified. She hadn't been to India, but she had spent 2 decades quietly practicing mindfulness each morning. And when she saw that others around her were struggling with anxiety, grief, and loneliness, she simply began to share what had helped her. "I'm not here to fix anyone," she told me. "I just tell them what helped me breathe again." That's what learning looks like after 60. It's not about mastery, it's about generosity. And sometimes it's not even about teaching others. It's about teaching yourself again. Learning a new instrument, writing down stories for your grandchildren, exploring Buddhist texts with fresh eyes, even learning how to navigate a changing body or a shifting world with patience and grace. These are all forms of sacred learning. The Buddha himself was called Siddhartha, one who is on the path to understanding. Not one who had already understood everything, but one who was still learning. That in itself is a lifelong identity. Another powerful practice is what Buddhists call Dharma sharing. You don't need a stage or an audience. It can be as simple as telling a friend, "I heard something today that moved me," or "This quote helped me through a hard moment." When we offer what we've learned, even in small doses, we create ripples. We light candles we may never see burning. And if you feel like you have nothing to teach, remember this. The one who still remembers what it's like to struggle becomes the most compassionate guide. You don't need answers, you only need presence. Often the most powerful thing you can say to someone younger is not, "Here's what you should do," but simply, "I understand. I've been there too." So keep learning, not because you're incomplete, but because the soul expands with each new insight. Keep teaching, not because you are superior, but because your footsteps can help light the way for others still wandering in the dark. And most of all, keep sharing your story, even if your voice trembles, because the world doesn't need more perfect experts. It needs real humans willing to speak their truth. Part 7. Peace in the storm of emotions. There's something paradoxical about emotions. They come and go like clouds across the sky, shifting, swirling, sometimes passing gently, other times crashing like thunder. And yet, the older we get, the more we might expect ourselves to have figured them out. As if age by itself should grant us immunity to anger, regret, fear, or sadness. But the truth is, no one outgrows their humanity. And perhaps we're not meant to. I once sat with an elderly man named Arthur during a week-long silent retreat. He was 81, dignified and quiet. But on the third day, he didn't show up for the afternoon sitting. I found him later by the edge of the retreat center's garden, sitting alone with tears running down his face. When I gently asked if he was all right, he shook his head. "I just remembered something cruel I said to my wife 40 years ago," he whispered. "It just came back." The past, as we know, does not stay buried. Emotions, even those we thought long resolved, can resurface without warning, like letters delivered late by time itself. And when they do, we are offered a sacred opportunity not to judge ourselves, not to suppress the feeling, but to meet it with presence. In the Buddhist tradition, emotions are not enemies to be defeated. They are visitors, cittavati mind, moments that arise due to causes and conditions. The Buddha taught that most strong emotions like anger or fear have a physiological lifespan of just 90 seconds. That is, if we don't feed them with stories, resistance, or rumination, they pass on their own. This is a powerful insight. The first wave of emotion may be beyond our control, but what happens next? That's where our freedom begins. One of the most beautiful practices in Buddhist psychology is known as RAIN, an acronym created by teacher Tara Brach, rooted in centuries of mindfulness practice. Recognize what is happening, allow it to be there, investigate with gentle curiosity, nurture with kindness. When you feel sadness arise, perhaps a memory, a disappointment, or simply the ache of loneliness, you can pause. Place a hand on your chest, breathe, recognize, this is sorrow. Allow. It's okay to feel this. Investigate. What does it feel like in my body? And then nurture. May I hold this with care? This is not weakness. This is inner strength, spiritual maturity. It is walking into the storm with an umbrella of awareness. The Buddha himself was never afraid to show emotion. He grieved the death of his disciples. He comforted the sick with tenderness. He told Ananda, his faithful attendant, that loving others deeply is not a distraction from the path. It is the path. And yet, we live in a world that often tells us to get over it, to stay strong, to keep moving. But what if true strength isn't in pushing feelings away, but in holding them gently like a crying child? I remember a woman in her 60 seconds once saying to me, "I spent my whole life trying not to feel too much. Now I just let myself feel everything. And strangely," she said, "I've never been more at peace." There was something deeply liberating in her face, not the absence of pain, but the absence of resistance. You see, emotions are not problems to solve. They are messages, sometimes messy, sometimes unclear, but always pointing towards something inside us that longs to be seen, to be heard, to be healed. And when we avoid difficult conversations, we create emotional debt that accrues over time, like unopened letters piling up in the hallway of the heart. The longer we wait, the heavier they become. But one honest moment, one sentence spoken with love, can clear years of silence. So let this be the season in your life where you no longer apologize for feeling, where you no longer hide your tears or swallow your truth. Let this be the time when you sit with your sorrow, your joy, your fear, and say, "You are welcome here." As the Buddha said, "As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. And yet even the rock feels the wind. Let that be your strength, not in being unmoved, but in staying centered within the movement. Because peace does not mean the storm never comes. It means you no longer lose yourself in the rain." Part 8. Money, time, and the inner riches. Somewhere along the winding path of life, many of us are taught, often without words, that success means accumulation. A bigger home, a newer car, a better neighborhood, a retirement fund large enough to quiet the fear of uncertainty. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these. The problem begins when we equate net worth with self-worth, or when our pursuit of money begins to consume the very thing it was meant to protect our time. I once had tea with a retired attorney named Charles. He had spent 4 decades climbing the ladder of his career. Brilliant, disciplined, respected. At 70, his portfolio was full, but his calendar was empty. No hobbies, no close friends, estranged children. He stared out at the garden as we sat in silence, and then said quietly, "I thought I was building a life. Turns out I was building a fortress." That moment broke something open in both of us. The Buddha was not against wealth. He himself taught kings and merchants, and he accepted the generosity of lay followers who had means. But again and again, he warned of attachment not just to things, but to the illusion that things could protect us from impermanence. The wise man, understanding that wealth is impermanent, gives it away generously and lives with a heart free of clinging. The Dhammapada says, "What does this mean in our time?" It means asking, is your wealth giving you more life or costing you life? Because many people spend their healthiest years chasing income and then use that income to try and buy back time, peace, or connection they lost along the way. But time cannot be stored. It cannot be rewound. And unlike money, no one knows how much of it they have left. There's a powerful term now called time affluence. The feeling of having enough time to do the things that bring meaning. Strangely, studies show that as people get wealthier, time affluence often goes down. Why? Because as income grows, so do responsibilities, expectations, lifestyle demands. The bigger the house, the more to clean. The fancier the car, the more to insure. The more stuff we own, the more we must maintain, protect, and stress over. A Buddhist monk once told me, "Every object you buy also buys a portion of your attention. Be careful what you purchase with your peace." There's also a beautiful shift that happens when people begin to value experiences over possessions. A sunset walk, a trip to see the ocean, a quiet dinner with a dear friend. These things do not depreciate. They age well, they grow sweeter in memory, and they often cost less than we imagine. One elder I met had a lovely habit. Every month, instead of buying something new for herself, she used the money to create a small moment of joy for someone else, a surprise lunch for her daughter, flowers left on a neighbor's porch, a donation to a local food bank. "That," she said, "makes me feel wealthier than anything in my closet." This is not about guilt. It's about freedom. Real wealth in Buddhist thinking is measured not in dollars, but in inner spaciousness, the ability to sit in your home, breathe deeply, and know that nothing owns you. The capacity to say no to what drains your life force, and yes to what nourishes your soul. And perhaps the most powerful financial wisdom the Buddha offered was this: live with enough, share the rest. Not as sacrifice, but as liberation. Because when we loosen our grip on money, we discover how tightly money was gripping us. So ask yourself gently, what is enough for me truly? What would I do with more time, even if I had less income? Where in my life have I mistaken busyness for richness? Because you may not be able to buy more years, but you can uncover more life within the years you already have. And when you look back, it likely won't be the size of your bank account you'll remember. It will be how freely you gave, how deeply you lived, and how richly you loved with both hands open. Partnina, creative expression. In later years, there's a quiet miracle that often goes unnoticed in the later chapters of life, a gentle resurgence of creativity, not the kind born of ambition or deadlines, but something softer, older, more sacred. A desire to express, not to impress. a longing to shape beauty out of stillness. And yet, many people after 60 have convinced themselves that this creative spark belongs to someone else, that painting is for the young, that music is for professionals, that writing is for authors. But the truth, spoken gently by time itself, is that creativity belongs to anyone who still breathes. I once met a retired mail carrier named Martha who had raised 4 children and spent most of her adult life waking up before dawn to work long, honest hours. At 71, newly widowed and living alone, she began painting on scraps of cardboard she found behind the grocery store. At first, she said, it was just something to keep her hands busy. But soon, her garage walls filled with color, sunsets, hills, birds, mid-flight. I asked her once, "Did you always love painting?" She paused, then smiled with a kind of wonder. "I think I always loved noticing," she said. "I just didn't know it had somewhere to go." In Buddhist tradition, creativity is not separate from the spiritual path. It is the path when walked with awareness. Whether you arrange flowers in a vase or hum while cooking, each act of creation is a form of mindfulness in motion. The poet Basho, a Zen practitioner, once wrote, "Sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself." The grass of your own creativity may have grown wild for decades unnoticed, but it's still there, still waiting. And the beauty of aging is that we finally have the space to tend it, to return to the forgotten instruments, the untold stories, the half-finished quilts, the poems written on napkins, tucked away and left unread. What holds us back often is not lack of time, but fear of being judged, fear of doing it wrong, fear that we've started too late. But the Dharma teaches that now is always the right time. The lotus blooms in the muddiest waters, and so too can our creativity blossom after seasons of silence. There is a Zen teaching that says, "Beginner's mind holds endless possibilities. Expert's mind holds few." At this stage in life, you are perfectly positioned to return to beginner's mind, not because you know nothing, but because you have seen enough to finally let go of needing to get it right. Maybe you once loved to sing but were told your voice wasn't good enough. Maybe you wanted to dance but felt too self-conscious. Maybe you longed to write but feared the page. Let this season of your life be the one where you reclaim those lost expressions, not for the world's applause, but for the quiet joy of being alive. Even simple acts can become profound creative offerings. Arranging stones in your garden, baking bread for your grandchildren, creating a photo album with handwritten captions. These are not hobbies. They are spiritual gestures. They say to life, "I am still here, and I still have something beautiful to give." And if inspiration doesn't come right away, that's okay. Creativity often starts like a rusty faucet. The first turns might bring nothing but brown water, stiff, clumsy, awkward. But if you stay with it, keep turning the handle, clarity flows. Do not let perfection steal your joy. As one Buddhist teacher once said, "The most beautiful bowls are the ones with cracks. They let the light through." You are not too old. You are not too late. You are just in a riper season with deeper roots and softer petals. So paint, write, hum, dance slowly in your living room at dusk. Whisper your stories to the trees. Make beauty not because you have to, but because your soul remembers how. And in doing so, you don't just express yourself. You become the expression, a quiet poem walking, a living brushstroke, a song held gently in the heart of time. Part 10. Energy and Mindful Living. There's something that becomes more precious than time as we age. Energy. Not just physical strength, but the quiet, sustaining kind of energy that allows us to be present, to feel deeply, to meet each day not with urgency, but with steady, spacious attention. Because even with time in abundance after the children have grown, the job is done, the calendar is mostly clear. What good is all that time if our energy is scattered, depleted, or spent on things that drain us? I once met a soft-spoken man named Elias during a meditation retreat in Oregon. He was 73 and had retired early to enjoy the golden years with his wife. But not long after, she passed unexpectedly, and his days began to feel heavy, disoriented. "I have time," he told me one afternoon, "but I don't seem to have the will to do anything with it. I just feel tired." He wasn't sick. He wasn't depressed. He was just exhausted from years of putting himself last, of giving and doing without ever pausing to refill the well. The Buddha taught that right effort is one of the core aspects of the Eightfold Path. But effort here doesn't mean striving. It means using your energy wisely, directing it toward that which nourishes, uplifts, and liberates the heart. Like a gardener choosing where to water, it's not about doing more. It's about tending to what matters. One of the most overlooked truths in the West is this: rest is not laziness. It is a sacred practice, a form of love. The body, like the earth, requires seasons of stillness. Just as fields must lie fallow before they bloom again, we too need time to simply be. But modern life has trained us otherwise. Even in retirement, the habit of overdoing lingers. Many feel guilty if they're not productive, as though rest must be earned. But the Dharma says otherwise. Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, people cannot live without a spiritual life, the Buddha said. And what fuels that spiritual life? Not constant motion, but clarity, softness, presence. Try this small practice before beginning any task, whether making breakfast or calling a friend. Pause for a moment and ask, does this give me life or does it take it away? Notice your body's response. You'll feel it if you listen. Some things energize us quietly, like reading, walking under trees, or laughing with someone dear. Others wear us down, like too much news, toxic conversations, or constant multitasking. Also, notice your daily rhythms. Mornings are often when clarity is strongest. Yet many people spend their mornings making decisions that drain them: what to wear, what to cook, what to clean. These small choices chip away at our attention. That's why monks wear the same robes every day, not for austerity, but to preserve energy for what matters most. This is the wisdom of decision simplicity. Wear what's comfortable, eat what nourishes, make space for what truly lifts your spirit. And then there's the idea of strategic incompetence, a playful, counterintuitive teaching. It means choosing to be bad at things that don't serve your path, so others stop asking you to do them. You don't need to be good at everything. You don't need to say yes to every request. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It's sacred stewardship. There's also great power in mindful recovery. A short nap, a cup of tea sipped slowly, even 5 minutes sitting by the window, watching the light change on the wall. These aren't luxuries. They are ways of returning to yourself. One monk I studied with in Thailand said, "Meditation is not about sitting still. It's about returning to the place you stopped listening." You can meditate while folding clothes, while sweeping, while drinking warm soup. The key is presence, not perfection. So ask yourself gently, what gives me back to myself? And begin there, because a full life is not measured in how much we did, but in how alive we felt while doing it. Let your energy be spent on kindness. Let your strength be reserved for love. And let the rest fall away like autumn leaves, making room for spring. Part 11. Community and quiet belonging. There is a loneliness that is loud, the kind that echoes in empty rooms, in forgotten birthdays, in unanswered calls. But then there is another kind, the quiet loneliness, the one that arrives even when you're surrounded by others. It doesn't speak much, it just sits with you at dinner. It lingers in the pause after you say, "I'm fine." And as we age, that form of loneliness can become a familiar guest. But here's the thing, we were never meant to walk this path alone. Even the Buddha, after attaining enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree, didn't retreat into silence forever. He walked, he taught, he gathered a sangha, a community of monks, nuns, and lay people not to worship him, but to support one another on the path toward liberation. I once visited a small Buddhist center in Vermont, tucked between tall pine trees and still lakes. The temple wasn't large, and neither was the crowd, just a handful of elders sitting on folding chairs, sipping tea after meditation. There were no robes, no chanting that day, just gentle laughter, soft conversation, and the quiet beauty of belonging. One woman, Ruth, said to me with a smile, "I don't come here for the teachings. Not really. I come because someone remembers my name." That simple sentence hit me like a bell. Because community isn't just about proximity, it's about being seen. It's about knowing that someone notices when you're not there, that someone remembers your favorite tea, that someone asks how your hip is healing, not out of politeness, but because they genuinely care. In Buddhist tradition, Sangha is considered one of the three jewels alongside the Buddha and the Dharma. That's how sacred community is. The Buddha once said, "Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life." He understood that while wisdom can be cultivated in solitude, compassion is nourished in connection. But in modern society, especially in the West, independence is often mistaken for strength. We are taught to be self-sufficient, to age gracefully without burdening others. And so many people suffer in silence, feeling that asking for company is somehow weak or worse, unwelcome. Yet the truth is, we need one another not just for help, but for joy, for laughter, for shared silence, for the ordinary sacred act of sitting together and simply being. I met a retired nurse named Gloria, who started hosting tea circles in her backyard every Sunday afternoon. There was no agenda, no structure, just neighbors young and old coming together to drink tea, share stories, or sometimes sit in silence. "It's not a support group," she said, "but somehow we all end up feeling supported." That is the magic of simple presence. Building community doesn't require fanfare. It can begin with a phone call, a handwritten letter, an invitation to walk together, a gentle check-in with someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Every act of connection is like water to a garden. It nourishes what might otherwise wither unseen. And if you feel like your circle has grown small or even disappeared, know that it's never too late to plant new seeds. Even casual conversations with a neighbor can blossom into deep friendship. Even joining a local group, a book club, a meditation circle, a gardening meetup can reopen the heart in unexpected ways. Because belonging isn't about being popular. It's about being present. It's about letting others see you not as who you were or who you think you should be, but as who you are now fully, honestly, tenderly. The Buddha reminded us that the path is not just inward, it is also relational. Every kind word, every listening ear, every shared moment of stillness is a brick in the bridge that connects us across our separateness. So reach out, not with expectation, but with openness. Share your time, your attention, your gentle smile. Because in doing so, you don't just build community, you become it. Part 12. Clear seeing and wise decision-making. There is a certain clarity that only time can bring, not the kind that arrives in sudden flashes like lightning in a storm, but the kind that dawns slowly, like sunlight spilling across a quiet floor. It often comes not from learning more, but from seeing more clearly what was there all along. And yet, clarity is not guaranteed with age. It must be cultivated. Because while we may gain experience, if we don't examine it, we can just as easily reinforce old patterns, carry forward outdated fears, and keep choosing from habit instead of wisdom. The Buddha called this moha delusion a fog of misperception that clouds our judgment and distorts reality. But he also gave us the antidote, vipassana, which means clear seeing. I once spoke with a retired librarian named Janice, who described a moment that changed the way she made decisions. "I used to react to everything," she said. "Someone would say something sharp, and I'd either shut down or bite back. I made choices based on emotion, not understanding. But now I pause. I ask myself, what is really true in this moment? And sometimes what's true is not what I thought." That pause, that sacred space between stimulus and response, is where liberation lives. You see, most of us move through life reacting. A feeling arises and we obey it. A thought appears and we follow it. But the Buddha taught that our suffering is often born not from what happens to us, but from our unexamined reactions. He once said, "With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves." This is why developing wise discernment is so essential, especially in the later years of life, because this is the season when many decisions are more internal than external. You may not be choosing careers anymore, but you're choosing where to place your attention, how to respond to health challenges, how to relate to family, how to spend the limited and precious energy you have each day. One powerful tool in Buddhist psychology is second-order thinking. It asks, not just, what happens if I do this, but what happens after that? And what are the ripple effects? For example, saying yes to something that feels polite in the moment, will that build resentment later? Avoiding a difficult conversation, will that create emotional debt over time? Another practice is called inverse thinking. Instead of asking, how do I get peace? You ask, how am I contributing to my own restlessness? It takes humility, it takes honesty, but it brings clarity that no external answer ever could. I once heard a Dharma teacher say, most of the time we're not choosing wisely, we're just choosing comfortably. And at first, that may sting, but if you sit with it, it becomes liberating because you begin to see that wisdom often asks for discomfort, not in the form of pain, but in the form of truth. And truth, while it may unsettle at first, always clears the air. So how do we cultivate clear seeing? We begin by slowing down by practicing Chan mindfulness in every small act, washing dishes with full awareness, listening without planning our reply, walking not to arrive, but to notice the steps. We also ask better questions, not, what do I feel like doing, but what choice aligns with my deepest values? Not, what do others expect of me, but what brings peace to my heart? And when clarity doesn't come immediately, we don't panic. We wait, we breathe. We trust that truth doesn't always shout. It often whispers, because in the end, wisdom is not a single grand decision. It's 1,000 small choices made each day with care. It's knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to act and when to let go, when to say yes and when to bow out with grace. So, if you're unsure of your next step, perhaps don't rush to decide. Sit, light a candle, let the waters of the mind settle, and in that stillness, something deeper will rise, not from fear, not from ego, but from the quiet knowing that lives within you like a lamp untouched by the wind. That is prajna, that is wisdom. Part 13. Designing a life of inner peace. There comes a point in life when we stop trying to figure everything out and begin to listen instead, not to the noise of the world or the opinions of others, but to the quiet wisdom within, the voice that doesn't shout, but hums beneath our busy thoughts, always waiting to be heard. For many, that shift happens after 60, after the striving softens, after the roles we once clung to, parent, worker, caretaker, begin to fall away. And in their absence, we're left with a beautiful, terrifying question: how do I want to live? In Buddhism, we are taught that life is not something that simply happens to us. It is something we co-create, moment by moment, breath by breath, through the choices we make and the intentions we carry. The Buddha called this bhavana the cultivation of the mind, the shaping of our inner world. And from that inner world, our outer life naturally blossoms. I once met a man named Thomas, a retired firefighter who spent his youth running into burning buildings. In his 70 seconds, he found himself waking up with no more emergencies to solve, no one calling his name. At first, he felt restless, even useless. But then he began taking long, slow walks each morning, at first just for exercise. But gradually, he said, the walks became conversations with life itself. He began bringing a notebook, jotting down thoughts, haikus, memories, gratitudes. I used to put out fires, he told me. Now I light candles. That shift from reaction to reflection, from fixing to simply being, is what designing a life of peace looks like. But here's the key. We don't need a perfect blueprint. In fact, the Dharma teaches that peace is not found in control, but in responsiveness. We design not by forcing life to obey our plans, but by making small, loving adjustments as we go, course corrections rooted in clarity, compassion, and presence. One simple practice is to think of your life as a garden. Each day, ask, what am I planting? What am I watering? What needs pruning? What am I letting bloom without interference? Maybe you begin your mornings with silence instead of screens. Maybe you learn to say no without guilt, and yes only when your heart hums a little. Maybe you set aside time each week, not for chores or errands, but for soul work, journaling, prayer, meditation, or simply gazing at the sky. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. As one Zen teacher said, if you want to transform your life, start by changing how you tie your shoes. The smallest shifts, done consistently with presence, create the most lasting peace. And peace in this context doesn't mean the absence of difficulty. It means no longer arguing with reality. It means choosing to meet each moment with openness rather than resistance. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is tanha, craving, grasping, the relentless sense that this moment is not enough. But he also taught the path out of suffering, letting go, not of life itself, but of the illusion that we are not already whole. So perhaps the real design of a peaceful life is not adding more, but subtracting what no longer serves. Let go of the need to be productive every hour. Let go of people who drain your joy. Let go of identities that no longer fit. Let go of the story that you are running out of time. Because right here, right now, you are exactly where life has brought you. And that place, however imperfect, is a sacred starting point. So design gently with soft hands, with a tender heart. Let your life become a sanctuary, not for perfection but for presence, a quiet haven where peace isn't a reward for doing everything right, but the natural result of loving what is. And when the day comes to look back, may your life feel not like a list of regrets, but like a handmade tapestry, stitched with intention, colored by kindness, and woven with the quiet joy of having truly lived. Conclusion: making each hour count. If you've made it this far, still here, still listening, then perhaps something in you has softened, or maybe something has awakened. A small flicker, a quiet realization. You don't need more time. You just need more presence. Throughout this journey, we haven't tried to outrun the ticking clock. We haven't made promises of eternal youth or infinite days. Instead, we've returned again and again to something far more powerful: this breath, this moment, this fragile and beautiful human life. You see, the teachings of the Buddha were never about escaping life. They were about entering it more fully, with clarity, with compassion, with courage. And, as we've seen, the truly meaningful changes in life don't come from grand revolutions, but from small, conscious choices made over and over again. Choosing to pause before you speak, choosing to forgive even when no apology comes, choosing to walk slower, breathe deeper, love wider, choosing to let go again and again and again, from time perception to relationship building, from energy preservation to creative expression, from letting go of possessions to reclaiming your voice. Every principle we've explored is really about the same thing: living awake. Not perfectly, not without pain or loss, but awake enough to notice the color of the sky today. Awake enough to feel the warmth in someone's voice. Awake enough to sit with sorrow and not push it away. Awake enough to feel joy without needing a reason. The Buddha once reminded his disciples, "A moment of pure awareness is more precious than 100 years lived in forgetfulness." So, if you're wondering where to begin, the answer is simple: here. And if you're wondering when, the answer is now. Because your life is not behind you. Your life is not waiting for some better version of you to arrive. Your life is already here, unfolding, calling you, offering itself moment by moment. Maybe today all you do is sit for 5 minutes with a cup of tea and notice how it warms your hands. Maybe you reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe you say, "I forgive you," or maybe you say it to yourself. Maybe today you simply look out the window and whisper a quiet thank you for breath, for body, for one more chance to begin again. Because that's all we ever really need. Not more time, but more presence within the time we have. So, as we come to the end of this reflection, I invite you gently, without urgency, to choose just one idea from everything we've shared. Just one. Let it sit beside you like a friend. Let it grow roots in your day. Let it become part of how you move through this world with less fear, more grace, and a heart that knows what truly matters. You were never meant to race through life. You were meant to live it slowly, sincerely, deeply. And no matter your age, your past, or your regrets, it is never too late to begin again. Because life, in its essence, is not measured by how many years we live, but by how many moments we are truly awake for. And the best moment to wake up is always now.